What if the absolute worst way to solve a problem with your enemies is to actually try and find common ground?
Right, which sounds completely backwards.
It does. I mean, when we usually think about teamwork, we expect order. You picture like a construction site where the blueprints are laid out, everyone is perfectly synchronized, and, the plumbers aren't actively trying to sabotage the electricians.
Exact.
We are taught that collaboration means getting everyone on the same page, but today we are just completely tearing up that blueprint.
We really are, because the comforting illusion of conventional teamwork, it just shatters the moment you step into the messy, deeply uncomfortable reality of actual human conflict.
Yeah, that falls apart.
It does. The idea that we must all agree on the end goal to make progress is not just naive, it is actively preventing us from solving our most complex issues.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are tackling a challenge that I think every single one of you listening wrestles with. Basically, how on earth do you solve intractable, complex problems alongside people you fundamentally disagree with, dislike, or just straight up do not trust?
It's incredibly hard.
It is. What do you do when half the crew thinks they're building a house, the other half insists on a submarine, and they both, actively despise the project manager?
Right. And to explore this, we are pulling from some incredibly timely source material today. We've got excerpts from the book Collaborating with the Enemy by Adam Kahane, and it features this really brilliant foreword by Peter Block.
Yes.
And just a context, Kahane is an international expert who has mediated some of the most fraught geopolitical conflicts of the last 30 years.
So he knows what he's talking about.
Right.
And our mission for you today is simple, but it is definitely not easy. We are going to dismantle the conventional, sterile ideas we hold about collaboration and replace them with a realistic, road-tested framework for getting things done in a polarized world.
Getting things done without losing your mind, right?
Right, or your values.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, working with people we despise feels entirely unnatural. And Peter Block points this out in the foreword by drawing a really sharp distinction in the stakes. He notes it is, easy enough to collaborate with people you simply disagree with on a technical level.
Like a disagreement over a spreadsheet or something.
Exactly. The temperature rises when you have to work with people you don't like personally, but the dynamic becomes incredibly toxic when you must collaborate with people you simply do not trust.
People you genuinely view as the enemy. And the reason this feels so impossible stems from this psychological reflex Kahane calls the enemifying syndrome.
Yeah.
And I love that term because it turns the concept into an active verb. We are actually doing it. Enemifying is our deeply ingrained habit of seeing other people strictly as the root cause of our problems.
Because it's a defense mechanism, really. We enemify because it reduces cognitive load. I mean, real-world problems are nuanced and just overwhelmingly complex.
Oh, absolutely. And our brains are hardwired to seek cognitive ease. We want to conserve mental energy by finding the simplest possible narrative. And blaming an enemy provides that instantly.
It's just easier.
It is. It simplifies a multi-hued reality into absolute black and white. It reassures us that we are the righteous victims, and therefore, we are not responsible for the structural difficulties we are facing.
And the text highlights this perfectly with that quote from the journalist H.L. Mencken. He said, "There is always an easy solution to every human problem, neat, plausible, and wrong."
Neat, plausible, and wrong. That cognitive ease is incredibly seductive. And what I appreciate is that Kahane is remarkably honest about falling into this trap himself.
Oh, the story he tells is great.
Right. Remember, this is a world-class facilitator of peace, yet he shares this profoundly embarrassing failure from his own career.
The 2015 workshop story, it is so humanizing to read. So Kahane is facilitating this massive high-stakes workshop with 33 national leaders trying to solve these deeply entrenched issues of inequality and insecurity.
Huge stakes.
Huge. And he feels great about it. He thinks he's, nailing the facilitation. But on the final morning, his own organizing team gets into an argument over some logistical glitches. And behind his back, they write up a highly critical note about his performance and circulate it.
And the International Peace Facilitator immediately abandons all of his own teachings.
He absolutely loses it. He gets wildly defensive. He fires off this barrage of angry emails to his team detailing exactly why he is the victimized hero and they're the villains trying to undermine him.
Wow.
I know. He admits in the book that he became suspicious, rigid, and just wanted his own colleagues to disappear. He enemified his own team.
Which is wild. If a global expert on collaboration can snap like that over a logistical critique, it just underscores how deeply wired this reflex is.
Seriously.
And Kahane also points to the macro level, looking at how politicians leverage this psychological reflex structurally.
Right.
He uses the 2016 U.S. election, specifically citing Donald Trump's campaign and ISIS, to highlight a universal tactic used across the entire political spectrum. And to be clear to you listening, we are just impartially reporting the text here, not taking any political sides.
Right, we're just looking at the mechanics of the strategy he outlines.
Exactly. The strategy is rallying a base by pointing at a common enemy. The message is always, you are angry, you are disenfranchised, and it is entirely because of those people over there.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though. Aren't some people actually working against us? I mean, isn't enemy-fying sometimes completely justified?
Yeah.
Because when I read this section, I couldn't help but compare enemy-fying to junk food. It feels deeply satisfying and comforting in the moment to bite into that burger of righteous anger. It tastes great to say, I'm right and you are evil.
Yeah, it really does.
But if you make a habit of it, it's terrible for achieving your long-term goals because it completely narrows your vision. You stop seeing solutions and only see the threat.
The junk food analogy captures the sugar rush of righteous anger perfectly. It distracts us from the systemic work. But this brings us to the core flaw in how we try to solve these standoffs. If enemy-fying is the trap, Kahane argues that our conventional idea of collaboration is the actual flaw.
How so?
Because conventional collaboration demands strict control and harmony. It operates on the assumption that everyone must agree on the definition of the problem, agree on the exact solution, and agree on the step-by-step plan to get there.
Like that sterile planning meeting we talked about. It requires a level of trust that simply does not exist when dealing with a polarized group or, an entrenched enemy. You cannot mandate harmony.
No, you can't. And this raises an important question. If conventional collaboration is a fantasy in these high-conflict situations, does that mean we should just throw our hands up and give up on working together entirely?
We often treat collaboration like it's a moral imperative, right? Like it is the only valid and virtuous way to handle a problem. But the book argues that collaboration is actually just one of 4 strategic choices.
Yes, the family story.
Right. Kahane illustrates this with this deeply relatable family story about John, Mary, and their adult son, Bob.
So Bob has fallen way behind on his mortgage again. He is on the brink of losing his house. John and Mary are terrified for him, but they are also financially and emotionally exhausted from bailing him out repeatedly.
They're at a breaking point.
They are at a total crisis point. And Kahane points out that they essentially have 4 universal options. And these are options that apply to any conflict, from a family dispute to corporate maneuvering, all the way to global politics.
So let's lay those out. Option 1, John and Mary could use their financial leverage to dictate Bob's life choices, perhaps taking over his bank accounts. That is, imposing your will unilaterally.
Right.
Option 2, they could just accept that Bob is going to be in perpetual debt, bail him out one more time, and try to make peace with the stress. That is, adapting, accepting the status quo, and working around it. Option 3, they could cut him off entirely and refuse to answer his calls. That is, exiting, just leaving the situation entirely.
And finally, option 4, they can sit down with him, despite the exhaustion and lack of trust, and try to find a new, co-created way forward. And that is collaborating.
So what does this all mean? When I was reading this framework, I immediately thought of playing a brutally difficult video game.
Oh, I like that.
You enter a new level,
Yeah.
and you have to evaluate the landscape. Sometimes the right move is to fight the boss head-on. That's forcing. Sometimes the best strategy is to just sneak past the enemies and use the environment to your advantage. That's adapting.
Yeah.
Sometimes the game is so rigged or glitchy that you just turn off the console. That's exiting. And sometimes you have to begrudgingly team up with a rival player online just to survive the level. That's collaborating.
That's a great way to look at it. You have to actively assess the board and choose your strategy. And the text provides fascinating historical examples of when major players strategically chose not to collaborate. Take the Sustainable Food Lab initiative in 2003. Kahane was organizing this massive effort to get corporations, NGOs, and governments to make the global food system more sustainable.
Yeah.
But 3 critical groups declined the invitation.
Because they ran the calculus on their leverage, right?
Exactly.
One massive global corporation decided to pursue sustainability entirely in-house. They wanted a competitive edge over their rivals, so they chose a mix of forcing and adapting.
And then an international workers' organization also declined, but for the opposite reason.
Right.
They felt they lacked sufficient leverage at that moment. Sitting at a table with powerful corporations would only result in them being steamrolled. So they chose adapting in the short term to build their own grassroots power with the intention of forcing their demands later.
And then a government agency also stayed away, choosing to adapt, because participating would compromise their role as an unbiased regulator.
Exactly. And the text applies this lens to entire nations as well. In Venezuela, the Chavez government specifically refused to collaborate with the capitalist opposition because enemifying them was a highly effective political strategy for retaining their base.
So forcing was their chosen tool there, and again, just objectively looking at the political utility of it.
Right. The book also examines Thailand between 2010 and 2013. A group of citizens initially tried to foster collaboration to stave off a brewing civil war. But as political unrest exploded into the streets and violence escalated, the citizens realized collaboration was no longer viable.
It just doesn't make sense anymore.
The environment had shifted too drastically, so they abandoned the collaborative approach and reverted to forcing.
The takeaway for you listening is that you are not failing simply because you choose not to collaborate. Sometimes exiting or adapting is literally the smartest strategic move. But what happens when forcing, adapting, or exiting simply are not viable options? Like, what do you do when you are staring down the barrel of a complex crisis and you must choose collaboration despite intense conflict and zero trust?
The text calls this the miraculous option. And to explain it, we go to South Africa in 1991 for the Montfleur scenario exercise.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So the context here is critical. Apartheid is collapsing. Nelson Mandela has recently been released from prison. The tension in the country is astronomical, and the threat of catastrophic civil war is looming over everything.
It's a total powder keg.
And against all odds, leaders from across the deeply segregated society, black and white, opposition and establishment left and right, they agree to come together.
I mean, picture the absolute lack of trust in that room. These are people who just months prior were literal enemies in a violently oppressive system. How do you get them to build a country together?
It seems impossible.
It does. Kahn explains that they used a scenario methodology developed by Royal Dutch Shell. Instead of arguing about current policies or fighting over who gets power tomorrow, they brought everyone together to build hypothetical stories about what the country could look like in 10 years.
And the brilliance of the Shell methodology is that it removes the immediate pressure of decision-making. By asking these sworn enemies to craft hypothetical futures, both dystopian and utopian, they were forced to sit in the same room and look at the same data.
They weren't negotiating a treaty, they were just telling stories.
Right. But in the process of mapping out those stories, they began to see the systemic mechanics of their shared reality. They began to see how intertwined their fates actually were.
And Kana shares this profound joke he heard in Cape Town around that time. Faced with the overwhelming, seemingly unsolvable problems of transitioning the country, South Africans had two options.
Okay.
The practical option was to get down on their knees and pray for a band of angels to come down from heaven and fix everything. The miraculous option was to actually sit down and work things through together.
I love that. What's fascinating here is that to achieve this miraculous option, Kahane argues we have to completely throw out the polite corporate playbook. We must adopt what he calls stretch collaboration.
Stretch collaboration.
Yes. If conventional collaboration is a sterile, orderly board meeting, stretch collaboration is a martial arts practice. It is messy, it embraces discord, and it requires you to be on the mat, reacting and adjusting in real time.
Stretch collaboration completely pulls us out of our comfort zones. And the book outlines 3 fundamental shifts or stretches that we have to make to pull this off.
The first shift changes how we relate to each other. Stretch 1 is to embrace conflict and connection. We have to abandon the goal of perfect team harmony.
Which requires fighting our own biology. When someone holds a worldview that directly contradicts ours, it triggers cognitive dissonance. It literally feels uncomfortable in our brains. We desperately want to resolve that tension by proving them wrong.
Of course we do.
But stretch 1 dictates that we must accept multiple diverse perspectives as valid simultaneously. You can have totally opposing worldviews in the same room, and you do not have to resolve that tension to move forward.
And the text grounds this in a fantastic quote often attributed to the physicist Niels Bohr. He said, "For every great idea, the opposite idea is also true."
That is so good.
Embracing that paradox is essential, because if you accept that you all disagree and no one is going to surrender their worldview, well, how do you actually take action? You can't write a 5-year strategic plan when you can't even agree on the problem.
Right.
That necessitates the second shift. Stretch 2 is to experiment a way forward.
In conventional teamwork, you don't take a single step until the blueprint is finished and everyone has signed off on the final deliverable. Stretch collaboration demands that you stop insisting on clear agreements and a perfect plan. The book uses this incredible visual, crossing the river by feeling for stones.
Because you don't have a map of the riverbed. You can't see the other side.
Exactly how this plays out in a corporate setting is where the rubber meets the road. Let's say you have two rival department heads who despise each other, and they're arguing over a massive software migration.
Oh, a classic nightmare.
Right. Conventional collaboration says they need to lock themselves in a room until they agree on a multi-million-dollar 3-year rollout plan. That will never happen. They will just ennemify each other.
Yeah, they'll just dig their heels in.
But Stretch 2 says, stop arguing about the 3-year plan. Instead, you run a 2-week pilot program in one small branch. You put one foot out, feel around in the murky water, find a stone, and step. You evaluate the data from that 2-week pilot together. Then, you feel for the next stone.
It is entirely iterative. It requires surrendering the certainty of knowing exactly where you will end up. You have to allow the solution to emerge from the experimentation rather than trying to engineer it from the start.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the most difficult shift of all. Stretch 3 requires you to step into the game.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is the ultimate ego killer. Stretch 3 demands that you stop trying to change what other people are doing and enter fully into the action with a willingness to change yourself.
It's a hard pill to swallow.
It really is. When I first read that, my immediate reaction was completely defensive. Does this mean we just surrender? Do we abandon our own values, roll over, and let the enemy win just for the sake of progress?
That is the most common fear when people hear this framework. But changing yourself does not mean compromising your fundamental truth.
I kept visualizing it like playing in a jazz band. Imagine you are a saxophone player thrown onto a stage with a trumpet player you fundamentally dislike, and you are both reading from different sheets of music.
Okay, I see where this is going.
You don't have to play the exact same notes as the trumpet player to make music. You don't have to suddenly pretend you like the trumpet player, but to keep the song from collapsing into pure noise, you cannot just forcefully play your sheet music louder than everyone else. You have to listen, experiment, and adapt your own playing in real time based on the notes they are hitting. You are constantly changing your output to serve the immediate reality of the music, but you are not surrendering your instrument.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that jazz analogy perfectly encapsulates the death of traditional change management.
Yes.
Historically, we rely on a top-down, almost colonial approach to solving problems. An elite group of experts or executives sits in a room, decides what the future should look like, and dictates that vision to everyone else.
And it just doesn't work anymore.
Stretch collaboration recognizes that this top-down engineering is completely obsolete in complex, polarized environments.
You cannot dictate a solution from above when the people below hold fundamentally incompatible worldviews. You have to co-create the solution from within the mess.
You must realize that you are as much a part of the problem as anyone else in the room. You have to notice that you are an active player on the field, not a director sitting safely off stage trying to pull strings.
This is a profound shift in how we approach our daily lives and our work. So, to synthesize this journey for you listening, the most liberating takeaway here is that you do not have to like someone, and you do not even have to trust someone to make meaningful progress with them.
It's true. But to achieve that progress, you first have to recognize that the harmonious, perfectly aligned boardroom is a fantasy. Assess the landscape. Ask yourself if collaboration is genuinely your best strategic move right now, or if you should be exercising your leverage through forcing, adapting, or exiting.
And if collaboration is the only viable path forward, you have to stretch. You have to embrace the friction of conflicting ideas, cross the river by feeling for stones rather than demanding a map, and most importantly, step onto the mat with the willingness to change your own behavior rather than demanding your enemy changes first.
It requires immense vulnerability. Adam Kahane understands the weight of this ask, which is reflected in a very specific dedication he placed at the beginning of the book. He dedicated his work to my enemies and teachers.
To my enemies and teachers. He doesn't separate them. He merges them into the exact same entity.
So we leave you with this final thought to explore on your own. Think about the person you currently view as your biggest obstacle, whether that is a bitter rival at work, a deeply frustrating family member, or a political opponent in your community. What if that specific person is actually the exact teacher you need right now to force you to stretch your own capabilities?
What if the enemy is the teacher? That is a concept that will completely rewire how you walk into your next conflict. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you take these tools, get on the mat, and start feeling for those stones.
We appreciate you listening. Keep stretching.
Take care, everyone.